Welcome, Money Buddies, to this week's episode of Money Talk. This week, we're talking about mindset, money talks, and using money as a tool. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming, and let's get talking. You are all going to thoroughly enjoy today's interview. I know I enjoyed recording it. We're going to tackle some things that are really most important for people to figure out and that we all kind of learn when it comes to money as we're progressing through just kind of this journey dealing with our money. It's not all about investing or chasing returns. It's about recognizing money as a tool and using that tool well. You're going to hear me make reference to the kind of person that you watch those videos, right? And they're just sitting there carving these fine lines in a piece of wood or clay or whatever it might be. And then at the end of the video, you see this just amazing piece of artwork they created. Money can be that kind of a tool to help design your life. Then in the end, you have this beautiful piece of artwork that you created that you call your life that really allows you to accomplish what you want to accomplish. There's no limit on the goals you can set, the dreams you can have, and really the just power that you have to create the life you want to live with your money. And today's guest is going to help us break that all down. We're going to talk about how you can build a safe space when it comes to talking about money. We're going to touch on how to get those conversations started and kind of what to do in order to help people feel comfortable if they start talking about money around you. And then we're going to help you move from money goals to money tools, because so often it can be a piece of cake to view money as a goal, right? $100,000 invested is kind of that threshold to invest to, right? But what does that actually mean? What does that allow you to do? Does $100,000 invested allow you to do who knows what, right? And that's where we can view money as a tool to start accomplishing the things that we are envisioning with our life. But today's money buddy is Michelle Malawer. Michelle is a money coach who empowers high-earning women to build confidence with their finances and live their best, well-funded lives. She combines professional expertise with personal transformation, having overcome her own financial struggles after losing her mom and sister by age 30. Through her coaching, which draws on inner wisdom and power-building approaches, she helps women take control of their financial lives on their own terms. The money talking points for this week are: why is talking about money important? What challenges do women face with money? And third, what do you think of one-size-fits-all financial advice? With those many talking points in mind, let's get talking and welcome Michelle to the show.
Thank you so much, Skylar. Very excited to be here today.
Yeah, this will be fun. I'm excited to learn how you handle money, how you talk about money, and get an answer to some of these questions. We'll start off like we do every episode with our money talking points. These are just quick points that for the audience, they can take and have a conversation with your friends, family, coworkers, really anyone. These are supposed to be simple talking points. But the first one here for you, Michelle, is why do you feel that talking about money is important?
I feel talking about money is important for everyone, but specifically for women for a few reasons. The first reason, most simply, is to get a fair salary and make sure you're being paid market rate. You can do your own research and look up salaries online with different resources, but in my experience, there's nothing like actually speaking to people in the field, asking them about their real salaries. It's been very helpful for me when I was working at a broker-dealer as an analyst. It was my first real job. And I started off making $71,000 base with a bonus. When I left, I was up to 79. I never got promoted there, and I always had this nagging sense that I was underpaid. I spoke to a senior analyst on the team. She had a few more certifications than I did, but she shared her salary was 125 base. And just hearing that number really made me realize I am not being paid market worth. It helped me tremendously when I went out to interview at other firms. And actually, this person, I followed her. She's since moved to 2 different firms. Each time getting a raise of at least $50,000. Hearing what she's paid has been very helpful to me. So getting real data, I think. Another big reason, especially for women, is to be inspired. So I'll give you an example. I had an acquaintance who had a voice coaching company, reached $1 million in revenue per year. In 2018, we were sitting at an event, and she shared with me she was putting $80,000 in her retirement fund per year at the time. And this figure blew my mind open. I had this was back in the day. I wasn't following content of business owners. I wasn't a big thinker. And just to hear that my acquaintance was putting $80,000 a year in retirement was life-changing. Now, with my own business, I have much bigger goals. And just the last reason, I don't hear this too much being talked about, but money is a tool. I think when women wield their money with power and when women have money, they make the world a better place. This has been shown again and again. Women are 17% more likely than men when they invest for causes like sustainability, equality. Multiple development organizations have papers showing how highly women reinvest in their families and communities, some even up to 90%. When women become comfortable talking about money and they build their self-trust with money, they use it for impact to create a more just, clean, inclusive world.
Yeah, and those are all really fantastic points to kick us off here, is that talking about money is important, male or female. If you're in a workplace, talking about it, like you said, helps you get paid fairly. And my last position, I was in a role where I was managing a team and I reported to the company's COO. When I brought up that my people on my team were talking about their salaries right, and there was a little bit of strife, as there should be. I'm definitely a pro like salary transparency and things like that. It was interesting to hear from that executive level, the instant pushback of, oh, you shouldn't do that. It just makes everyone feel bad. It's like, why do people feel bad? It's because they're being underpaid. Like you need to make sure you're framing it as like, it's the company that's causing the bad feelings, not the people and their conversations they're happening to have, because talking about it's so important.
Exactly. And that reminds me when the company I was at, the brokerage firm, was acquired by a much bigger brokerage firm. The person at the head of that department said, if you're not complaining about your salary, we're paying you too much. And I was just shocked to hear that. I shouldn't be shocked, but it's to your point. Exactly.
It's annoying to hear conversations like that, but that's how the business world thinks. If you're talking about it, you're going to realize you're being underpaid. And that's okay, because that's what's going to push you to be motivated to find a new job. That can be a pretty big hurdle to say, I need to go out and do the whole job hunt. But one thing that came to my mind as you were sharing there, you were sharing a lot from the perspective that women face in the world and the workforce and with their money. Even for the men listening, don't tune out. This is a great place to hear some of the differences. And that's one reason I like having these conversations on my podcast. Obviously, from my lens, I don't face the same challenges. There may have been situations where I'm being paid more than female counterparts, and I'm not aware of that. And just being aware of it, or being aware of how women can invest differently, just helps you bring a new perspective to all of this. And I think that's what's so helpful, because our next money talking point that I'm excited to hear is, what kind of challenges do women face with money?
We often hear that women have a hard time asking for raises, maybe. Women are less likely than men to invest because they want to fully understand everything about investing before they pull the trigger. Those aren't the points I want to talk about, because I think they're covered fairly frequently. But I can tell you a few things that I've seen from my clients. Skylar, number one, giving away too much, specifically for love, not valuing their labor and their contributions, whether it's in a partnership or at a workplace, not being included in the finances or leaving the finances up to their partner. And that's where a ton of horror stories come in. So about the giving too much specifically for love, I have a client right now. I'll probably talk more about her. She is a high earner. She has $100,000 in various kinds of debt, plus $32,000 tax debt. Plus, now that she inherited her mom's house, so she has two properties. They're currently not rented. She's bleeding at least $3,000 a month. One of the reasons she's in that situation is because in her marriage, she paid for everything. Her ex-husband contributed anything to rent. She paid for all the trips, all the upgrades, all the drinks on the cruises that he ran up. And I understand why she did that. She had a hard childhood. Her parents didn't love her in the way that she needed and wanted to be loved. So it felt like, oh, if I don't give all this, maybe he'll leave. Overgiving is a big one. The women I know are very generous people.
Well, even just right there on that story, like That's such a massive example of how it's not just the numbers, right? Like you mentioned, she has $3,000 that's just going out and whatever, right? But there's so much more to her financial situation than just the $100,000 in debt. All these other factors and numbers don't get at the root of, like you said, where it's her upbringing and her parents' relationship with her that has led her to spend in this way. And that's when money gets really powerful. And it goes back to what you mentioned, using it as a tool. And when you understand those emotional and behavioral weights that you carry and how money is being used to supplement them, I think that's a big eye opener for anyone, like male or female.
Yeah, she had a lot of emotions we have to work through. And she restarted with her therapist, which is always great. If you're doing money coaching and you need a therapist, get all the support you need. So the second, not valuing their labor or their contributions. I had another client this year who is getting divorced. It's a pretty amicable divorce, but after 30 years together with this person, she had a job, she left the workforce to stay at home, and she felt bad asking for 50% of the marital assets. Skylar, we calculated how much invisible labor she performed during the marriage. For example, we looked at if they had hired a driver, if they had hired a nanny, if they had hired her husband didn't really have a lot of friends, so he spoke to her a lot and she would help him with his identify his feelings if they paid a therapist. And it came out to over $4 million. It's almost unbelievable. Her ex-husband, his parents, they had one stock position, a single stock position, worth $1 billion. B, with a billion, not million, with a B. One stock position worth $1 billion. Even knowing that when her ex's mom will pass, he will inherit a large chunk of that money, it still was not enough to allow her to ask for 50%.
Wow.
I almost thought I didn't hear her right, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Yeah, that's a big situation to wrap your mind around those numbers. And that's why when I'm doing financial planning work, I think people especially undervalue, when it comes to like life insurance, the value of the stay-at-home spouse's life, right? And I mean, it's a morbid way to look at things when you're putting a dollar amount to it. But like you said, you hire a driver to get the kids places, you hire a nanny, you hire cleaners, you hire someone to do your grocery shopping, or like Instacart's so expensive. Like you just think about that value right there. That's all included in this person that, sure, they're not working, but they're providing way more value than you would ever realize. The billion with a B piece is obviously huge to wrap your mind around, but it's also crazy to wrap your mind around even $4 million worth of value. So often the tough situation is that you look at it as a stay-at-home spouse and it's like you look at it as like a net zero, right? But it's not. There is so much value there.
Yeah, if anyone is interested, I think if you Google, there are invisible labor calculators. Anyone is curious.
Cool. I'll find one and leave that in the show notes for everyone. I do want to move us on to kind of how people can learn and begin to apply this into their own lives. Why is a comfortable environment so important when we're talking about money?
I would say a safe environment, comfortable, safe, they're about the same things. And that's really important because people feel so much shame and so much judgment. Skylar, people come on my discovery calls, they'll cry. It's not unusual. They'll cry in sessions. And they'll say, there's no one I can talk to about this. When you feel judged or unsafe, you shut down. And that's the opposite of what we want. We want people opening up and being curious and being open to possibility and solutions. And when the space is safe or when it's non-judgmental, people can be really honest. And I find it's in that place of honesty where you can really transform. So when you're honest, you can feel comfortable asking dumb questions, can admit what you don't know. And from that place, you can get the information you need, start imagining what's possible for you.
Yeah, and that imagining piece, we're going to get to that here in just a moment about imagining bigger. But I do want to also touch on the fact that that's where a good planner or a coach can come into play, because they can create that safe environment for you, that comfortable environment where you can say, I have $30,000 in credit card debt and I don't know what to do. Whereas if you brought that up at a family get together to your parents, they may scold you and be like, how did you ever end up in that sort of debt? And then you shut down.
Exactly.
How do we build that space where we could talk about money safely?
I think building it is a little difficult. If anyone needs that space right now, the easiest thing to do is to find a space like that that already exists. Another word that I like for space is container. If you find a money coach who has group coaching and you join that container and that group, as the rules of the container are such that you are encouraged to speak about money and it's invited. So to find spaces that already exist, that when you walk into them, the rules are different than they are out in the world. And I loved what you said about the parents. Parents really can mess people up with money, and especially with their own judgments. One of the compliments I get most in my coaching is, wow, you didn't even flinch when I said the number of debt that I'm in, whether it's 40,000. That non-expression and I think is really important. Just to go back to the containers and space, so people have money coaching groups. There's also investing groups specifically for women. I love the organization Invest for Better. They do wonderful work helping women understand how to invest for impact and the changes that they want to see in the world. And another space that I really love, I hold a free money book club for women. I'm working on the curriculum for next year. And book clubs are an amazing space because you can use the text in the book as a point of departure for the conversations. People feel really encouraged to share.
Yeah, you said it can be challenging, but you just laid out great frameworks for our audience to build this space, whether it's starting to read a book with a group of friends that maybe you want to start talking about money, but you're not sure how to jump off into that conversation. So you go read, I don't know, a common book I always recommend is The Automatic Millionaire, and it can head in that direction of investing and like, how do you set up automatic retirement contributions? One of the things you mentioned is finding those containers like group coaching. Look for events at your local library. There might be a financial event, and you brought to my memory someone, I was hosting a few presentations at the library, and there was this older lady in her mid 60s, I would guess. She raises her hand and says, I have this retirement account that I don't know how to get money out of it. She's nearing retirement age and doesn't know who to ask this question to. And she came to an environment where she felt like she could raise her hand about her retirement accounts. Identifying those places where money is going to be talked about because they're like just a better place to jump off into those conversations. Oh, and then the other thing that I wanted to mention from what you were saying is the importance of body language. And this is kind of a comment for anyone that's aspiring to be a coach or a planner. That sort of body language, like that flinch or whatever you talked about.
Yeah.
If you flinch and jump back or you cringe when people mention the amount of debt they're in, it picks up quickly. Like that is an instant response without you even having to say anything. How do you think we can be careful with our body language if we are talking about money?
This is the thing, Skylar, and unfortunately there are a lot of people in our field who would have that flinch. Honestly, if you are going to have that flinch, maybe this is not the right field for you. People really need to feel comfortable. The people who flinch are the people who don't understand how a person could even get in a situation like that. I completely understand that because for several years I was addicted to credit cards and I had to get myself out of that addiction. So it makes sense to me, and I'm highly compassionate about people who have gotten in situations like that. But if you are in the money space and you do have that flinch, maybe you could be trained by another money coach or have your sessions recorded and get feedback and iterate on that, because that's costing you clients.
That's a completely different podcast episode we could go down around the like non-verbal communications that go into our money. Because yeah, if someone mentions a number and you feel a certain way, look at that as a signal to maybe change how you're viewing it. Have some more compassion around other people's situations. And frankly, it'll help in all sorts of areas of your life, but especially when it comes to having healthy money talks.
If you do find your questions are pigeonholing people, one question I love is always, tell me more. That way you'll be very surprised what they come up with, and you're not leading them. So you're getting the information you need.
The tell me more question is a gold mine as you keep working down that route. But you mentioned that you can begin to think bigger with your money. You can become inspired with your money as you work with these groups, or you work with these group coaching programs, or go to the library and become more familiar with talking about money in a healthy way. How do we begin to dream bigger with our money? How do we look beyond kind of these places where we feel stuck and begin to dream?
That's a great question. I do want to caveat for my answer is different for two different groups of people. If someone is in a lot of debt and it's really suffocating them, I do think the first step is some form of relief or a plan that gives. I found when people are in a lot of debt, it's very hard to open your mind and dream bigger till you get that sliver of relief and that extra mental bandwidth. For people who are in a fine financial situation, I would say the first thing is permission to desire. A lot of us don't give ourselves permission, and that can be cultivated. I'll name an exercise in a second. Also, exposure to people who think bigger than you, people who are dreamers, people who already have that muscle. I personally get that through different business groups that I'm a part of. So it could be a money coaching group or a business group, being surrounded by people who think big things are possible, and your environment, being with other high vibe people. Because, for example, you're not going to dream bigger if you're surrounded by Debbie Downers or your parents who are critiquing your every move. One exercise I like to build permission, and this is an exercise from Unbound, A Woman's Guide to Power by Kasia Urbaniak, is you keep a little notebook for an entire week. Every time you have a little hit of a desire, a little spark, you capture it. It can be rational or irrational. It could be like, oh man, I really want those truffle fries I had in Paris 5 years ago. Just noticing what's alive for you and giving it space. I think that's really important.
I love that idea. And I've heard it applied in a few different ways to money. Like, journal your feelings around your expenses, and that can be a way to identify what's not valuable. I like the idea of journaling the desires that come to your mind so you can plan a life around them. Maybe you love that one thing from Paris, right? And it was the greatest thing you've ever experienced. So you go back every few years. If that's what you want to do, then do it. That's what's so fun about finance, and what's getting me charged up right now is that you can do whatever you want to do. And like, this leads us perfectly into using money as a tool, which is, how do we shift from that point? I mean, your exercise is a great one, but how do we move from money as the goal or money as a number to money as a tool?
The first thing I would say is it's very easy to believe more money will make you happy. I personally have gotten raises from different jobs that I've gone to, and by this point, if I'm honest with myself, I see it's not the raise that makes me happy. So just even being aware of you always telling yourself, when I have more money, I'll be happier. The other way that we can be honest with ourselves is to know very clearly what we want. I love this example that Morgan Housel gives in his book, The Art of Spending Money. He gives an example of someone wanting to buy a bigger house. And what they want is not the bigger house. What they want is having guests over, having family, and all that connection and those quality times. Looking at the real thing that you want and using money as a tool. So if you are wanting more quality time and connection, using your money as a tool to host gatherings or to host people out of town and give them really wonderful tours of your city. I worked with someone a little while ago who, she's 62, Ivy League educated engineer, was in very high paying positions at tech companies. She realized she wanted out of the rat race and wanted to use her money for a life she loves. So now she is moving to Panama next year. She's retiring in Panama. We determined that the amount of money she needs per year is only $80,000. Once she sees very clearly, oh, I need this much money for health and I need this much for transportation, be very clear on what you want and need. And the last thing I'll say, and I love this concept, it's by Ramit Sethi. He writes about it in his money journal, and it's using different lenses to look at your money. Most of us default to viewing things through the lens of cost. Is this a lot? Is this a little? How much is this? But you can also use lenses such as, what if I thought about convenience? What if I thought about results? What if I thought about speed or delight? So an example he gives is, if you want to lose weight and your lens is cost, you're going to watch free workout videos on YouTube. But if your lens is results and speed and you want that bikini body by spring, maybe you pay for a trainer, maybe you pay for a chef. To experiment using different lenses with which to view your decisions can help you see money as a tool.
That's a fantastic lens to frame it with. I like that perspective because my wife and I were potentially looking at moving a few months ago into a smaller place that would have saved us some money on rent. And we thought, oh, we do like when our family comes to visit. We're not super close to them right now, so it's not like they can just do the day trip. They're probably going to need to stay with us. And then we had the idea of, well, if this is cheaper, could we afford to just set the money aside and put them in a nice hotel when they come to visit? Instead of needing,
Oh,
it
I
goes to the
love
bigger
that.
house example. Yeah, maybe you don't want to buy the massive house on the outskirts of town. You'd rather have the small town home in the central part where you can walk to everything, but it's not big enough to host your family. Maybe you can rent an Airbnb for the weekend they come up and you all experience this vacation in your town or something. Like there's so many different options. And I think that's what's really cool about the personal side of personal finance.
Yeah, I love that. And that's not even something that I had considered. So it's great talking to people and hearing how they do things and how they think big. And it would be amazing to rent an Airbnb and have everyone, maybe discover a new part of the city.
Maybe, yeah, you're not staying in your same neighborhood, going on the same walks around the block. Maybe you're staying in a nicer part of town or whatever, right? For the weekend that everyone's coming to visit and everyone has this like bigger, nicer memory versus this small, tiny townhome that you actually live in that works really well for your situation 95% of the year when no one's coming to visit. But then there's opportunity to save money to do other things. And I think that's a powerful perspective. Or maybe instead of them coming up to visit, you're all going on a vacation somewhere. And that's your way that you visit each other. So I love the idea of looking at money as a tool. How have you seen it help clients that you're working with? How have you seen that perspective shift really help? I know your example of the person retiring and moving is a great one, but how does this help them?
Yeah, seeing money as a tool is really helpful. I'll go back to that client I was telling you about. She's had so many mind shifts and transformations since we started working together. But the biggest thing is if it's just a tool and I don't have stories about it, maybe I can master it. And so now she sees if it is a tool, she just needs to learn a few things and she feels capable. She can make a difference. It's not this invisible, evil force. It's something that can be mastered. And so she's really changing her life, becoming solution oriented and figuring out different ways she can earn money. If she doesn't want to sell her 2 properties, maybe she can get a roomie, maybe she can get a raise, knowing that it can be mastered and that you can be solution oriented with it. And another thing with her, for example, is getting in touch with her visions. So because she's been so much in debt, she's been forgetting to think about what future do I actually want. And she's come up with really beautiful things like she has a property in Atlanta. She would love maybe to have a maker's workshop or a craft shop where she gives craftspeople snacks that she's made. She sees now it is possible. She'll have to do several things to get her numbers in order, but renting a space like that and doing that is not impossible. And money can be a tool for the visions and desires that she has.
Yeah, that's what's so fun once you get to a place where you can have that safe environment and you can begin to think about what you want to do with the money. There's always some way to figure it out. Now, of course, there's those big crazy goals like I want to fly on a private jet that maybe are too big for the money we have, right? There's always those big things that are just way out there. But the realistic things that we can all do, if you have these dreams and ideas and visions, there's always a way to make the money work. Whether it's I need to continue working in a high income job for 3 or 4 years, and then we can pull the trigger on this big, crazy, audacious plan that we have. Or it's simply bringing your family into town and putting them in a hotel. There's ways to make the money work. And that's when you start shifting it to a tool mindset that really helps. Because you think of the people who are like master craftsmen, right? They do all sorts of things with just a hammer, a screwdriver, and like some things to help hold it all together. And you're like, I didn't know a tool could be used in that way. Or you get stuck watching those short videos of people just using carving tools to make these crazy wood pieces or whatever, right? You can do that with your money. Like you can use your money to carve out this life you want to live. And then in the end, it's this really cool looking picture that you've made and created for yourself.
And I think why our profession is so important, Skylar, is because people are not used to thinking like that. So to them, when they look at money, they only see problems. So when I'm listening to someone tell their problems, I'm listening for solutions. That's why I think if someone is stuck, it is important to reach out to a professional who can help you.
How have you seen these conversation points that we're talking about today, using money as a tool, a safe environment to talk about it? How have you seen that impact your own life?
Oh, wow. My life. So I used to be a hot mess with money, Skylar. When I was 26, I was addicted to using credit cards. I was living in my dad's basement. I was looking for change to pay for gas. It was in a debt recovery program that I religiously attended for 10 years, where people were really, really honest about money. Skylar, they were so honest. People would share about stealing toilet paper from Starbucks. Even if they had money, they couldn't bring themselves to spend it on toilet paper. And that honesty about seeing where they were and relating to it, and then also hearing the honesty of what their life is like now that they've recovered from this compulsive spending and addiction, was really life-changing. And that it was the beginning for me of changing my life.
Yeah, as you've worked through this process, you're in a completely different point than you would have been if you didn't start talking about money. And that's why it's important for us to talk about money. You get in those groups where you're safe to talk about debt and your debt situation, and then you move on from it. Then you get into those groups where you're talking about your big audacious goals and doing fun things with your money. And then you do it and you get to the next stage, and you can keep moving up with these different groups of people. Michelle, this has been a fantastic conversation. I got two final questions to wrap us up here. The first one will just be, where can people connect with you online?
Right now, I am primarily on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to connect with me, please send an invite, send a message. If you're interested in coaching, if you're interested in the Free Money Book Club, just write me on LinkedIn.
And then one final question I ask all of my guests is, what's one thing you wish you would have known sooner from what we talked about today?
So going back to being a hot mess with money, Skylar, I wish I had known that I was not a bad person for being bad with money, and that things like that are maybe a trauma response and not a character flaw, and that there are solutions. So I just wish I didn't judge myself so harshly.
Yeah. And for everyone getting started, don't judge yourself so harshly about money. What happened in the past happened. You can figure out your path forward right now and keep moving forward and get going on the right direction. Michelle, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Skylar. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much to Michelle for coming on the podcast. I want to wrap up here and cover one talking point that we didn't get to today, which is, what do you think of one-size-fits-all financial advice? Well, being a podcast and an entertainment show and a financial education show, it's hard not to give one-size-fits-all advice on the show. And that's why financial planning and working with a financial coach can be extremely beneficial, because you can get one-size-fits-one advice. You can get that one-on-one advice, and that can be a massive deal. Getting the advice that takes that $100,000 portfolio that I mentioned as the goal, right, and helps you actually identify the values. And if you're looking for a financial planner to help you get your plan in order and help you figure out what are those values and goals that I can use my money as a tool to help me accomplish, please reach out to me. I would love to help you and get you introduced with the financial planning process, because I know it can benefit every single person out there. I'd be happy to look over your situation, offer some education and guidance. But what do you think of one-size-fits-all financial advice? A perfect example of one-size-fits-all is that everyone should be debt-free. And honestly, I don't think that fits all, because maybe there's a time and place where debt's extremely valuable, and maybe there's a time and place where it's not. Now, of course, it can be extremely beneficial advice, but when we really start getting into our personal financial situations, that's where one-on-one advice or one-size-fits-one personal advice can be so extremely powerful, because then you know that person that you're working with, they have your best interest in mind, and they are working with you to figure out what you need and how to accomplish your goals. But that does it for today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation today with Michelle. I know I did. Let me know down in the comments what you thought. And a quick plug here for my brand new show, Financial Planning for Young Adults. It's going fantastic. The subscriber numbers are climbing, so don't miss the train. Get in early as one of the early subscribers to the show, so that when it goes big, you can say that you were one of the first 100 subscribers, or whatever the number might be at the time you're listening to this. But that show is going fantastic. So if you know a young adult that could use some explanation around this great big world of finance, Financial Planning for Young Adults is a great show where we take the seemingly complex world of financial planning and make it simple and easy to understand for a demographic that has so much potential, because they have so much time to allow money to compound and grow. And if you can figure out how to make money be that tool like we talked about in today's conversation, the earlier the better, of course. And if you can figure that out, you have unlimited potential to do whatever you want to do with your money. But that does it for today's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, and the best way to stay up to date and connected with all things Money Talk is to subscribe to this very podcast. You can find links in the show notes to email me or leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube. And if you're looking to get started with budgeting, sign up for a Money Talk today using the link in the show notes, and I would love to work with you and help you with your budgeting or financial planning. The links are in the show notes. If you're a young adult or know one in your life who could benefit from some great financial planning advice, check out Financial Planning for Young Adults, right where you're listening to this show. And remember that the best way to learn from today's episode is to go and have a Money Talk about today's topic with a fellow money buddy. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Money Talk. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Money Talk. This show is provided for informational and entertainment purposes and may not be specific to your unique situation. Please be sure to do additional research before making any financial decisions.